I'm very excited to be speaking with artist and visual noir creator Leslie Patterson Sapp. Her visit is perfectly timed to be available for Noirvember. Leslie was born and raised in Portland, Oregon. She attended art school in New York City and graduated with a Bachelor of Fine Arts in 1991. She returned to Oregon and has lived there ever since. She creates narrative paintings and is deeply inspired by the past. For the last several years, she has been focused on making art that is inspired by film noir. Leslie, welcome. I'm really excited to be talking to you.
Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Great. The fans are going to get a lot out of this. Can you tell us a little bit about your background in art before film noir?
Certainly. Well, as you said in intro, I graduated from college in 1991. And then after that time, admittedly, I have to say, I just kind of fooled around quite a bit. I tried a lot of different artistic styles and just really kind of explored a lot and wasn't very focused. And it was really wasn't until 2009 that I really started to focus and get serious on having an actual style. And the thing that I landed on at that time was doing artwork that was based on vintage snapshot. And that was a really great series to do for quite a long time. So I would find vintage snapshots like in a secondhand store, or maybe it was something from my family or a friend's family or something like that. And I would create paintings on wood panel. And those were really great and very nostalgic. It's similar to the film noir in the sense that it really is based in the past and is fairly nostalgic. But after a while, it became a little too limiting. And I really wanted to do something that had more imagination and more emotion. And so after experimenting, taking another couple of years to just experiment with different things, I landed on film noir and really kind of found my home there.
Okay.
And it's been, yeah.
Now, when you said that the paintings, was that like No Vacancy, or was that in the film noir, or the Vacancy one?
The Vacancy one is a film noir one.
Okay.
Yeah, but it is, of all the film noir ones I've done, it's the one that is the most similar to the vintage snapshots. In fact, if you go on my website, you'll see it has a little thing that says portfolio, and it has a drop-down menu, and you'll see it'll say vintage snapshots, because some of these works, I'm not doing them now, but some of them are still available. And so if you wanted to see what they look like, they're still there.
Yes. They're really nice. Yeah. Go to the website after you finish watching this video and check them out. Oh, I was really interested when you talked about your class with Mark Andrus. In that class, you used a single film style and a single painter style of your choice to create a new work of art. Can you tell us about Lana Turner, Lost in the Land of Beckman?
I will. Yeah, I'm glad you like this one. So the assignment that I was doing was you had to do it in collage. I couldn't paint it. I had to do it in collage. I had to choose a single film image and then do it in the style of a painter I like. And Max Beckmann was a German expressionist painter, and his style is just completely and totally his own. And I really admire him, but he's really different than what I do. And I wanted to adopt some of his stuff. And for him, space inside of his paintings is not depicted in a straightforward fashion. It's very distorted. And so rooms sometimes look like they're collapsing or expanding, or they're starting to come apart a little bit, or rocking like on a ship, if you could imagine. And it gives this very disquieting feeling when you're looking at them. And so I took the film still from The Bad and the Beautiful with Lana Turner. Now, I know that's not really a film noir, but the film still really is very noir. I mean, she's like this world-weary woman, and she's got a cigarette, and it's just a really great image. And so I took it and I tried to just sort of like make it more expressive. And I came up with that Lana Turner, Lost in the Land of Max Beckman. And it just really hit. Like I was like, this is it. This feels really great. And so I ran with it ever since then.
Wow. You really found what you were looking for. That's amazing. You mentioned in your blog the term noir has been expanded to not just describe a moment in movie history, but to describe a sensibility that can be infused into any form of expression. I'm personally real interested in Dutch angles or extreme tilts. That's a technique I use in photography. And I've noticed several of your paintings, there were angles like that you see and in film noir, this is often used to make the viewer very uncomfortable. So what are your thoughts on, I mean, it's a commercial medium, but you're using the angles and somebody might be put off by the angle at the same time.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on, using the angles and how far you can tilt or before it becomes too much?
That's really an interesting question. Yeah, because you're right. The extreme tilts, I mean, they in traditional painting, sometimes they're just used to create a sense of space. Anytime you have a diagonal, it just goes back in space. But when you get that horizontal line kind of tilting a little bit, it really does give you the impression that there's something really wrong with the subject, right? With like the viewer
Right.
or the painting. And yeah, I understand what you're saying about the commercial aspect. And do I feel like I'm putting people off by having this? I don't know the answer to that. I wish I could tell you. Because for me, some people don't care if their work is appealing to people at all. And then other people, are extremely commercial and they want to only do things that please people. And I'd have to say I'm somewhere in between.
Okay.
It's like I want people to like my work, and I want it to be more than just sort of insipid sort of trying to please, So
Right.
because having the more expressive elements is really important to me. Yeah.
Okay.
But what's funny is that for a while there, I'm sorry to interrupt.
No.
But for a while there, I was going through this period where I was doing a lot of film noir pieces, but everything was at exact right angles.
Okay.
Like the one you mentioned, Blue Room. If you look at it, everything in there is an absolute right angle.
Okay.
And I realized I was doing that too much and I had to stop.
See, I know it's not about me today, but I took a film noir photography class out in Santa Fe. And after we went out and did our first night, me and my wife were a team, and we went out and did our first night, and all mine were 45-degree cocked. And then we showed them to the instructor in the morning. She goes, "Oh, that's terrible. There's way too much angle." And I said, "Well, I want to feel like Frank Bigelow when he walks out into the police station in DOA, his whole world's off kilter." So I love Dutch angles and big, awesome, uncomfortable angles.
Oh, that's cool. Have you continued that work?
I still regularly photograph. I've done a bit. We go out and we do night photography and astrophotography, and I need to get to a bigger town to do some more noir photography. Kind of hard around here.
Yeah, because it's so rural.
Yes. Yeah, there's not places where like masses of people gather. Okay. Femme fatales have often been Femme fatales have often been villainized for the methods used to obtain their goal. I believe this is the only tool or agency that women have in these cases in these films, and it's not more sinister than a man beating up or shooting another man. And I know you had some information related to this. Do you have any thoughts on how femme fatales are portrayed?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with you. And I think that the people, I mean, oftentimes they are presented as being like more evil than the man. But I think that has to do with like who's writing the films and who's reviewing the films and talking about the films rather than, the actual story. And then, of course, oftentimes they'll put an ending on it. And like, I don't know if you've ever heard this quote. I think it was, I'll bring it up later, The Human Desire, which is a great movie with Glenn Ford and Gloria Graham.
Yes.
And it has this kind of, and they did this a lot in old movies. I'm sure you talk about this and that you're aware of this, but oftentimes they put something on the end to make it okay with the censors, with the code.
Right.
Right? And so sometimes those endings are just like really strange.
Yeah, like Glenn Ford. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was saying, look, Glenn Ford, the way he drove away in his train with his girlfriend back, his job back, and no criminal charges or anything. I thought, what just happened?
Right. And then Gloria Graham's like, actually, I did it all. I wanted the money and I wanted this and I wanted that. And it's like, and what Eddie Miller on TCM said was, they literally said, blame it on the woman. Like they had a hard time resolving it with the codes that were necessary, and they just said, blame it on the woman. And so they put this really weird ending. Yeah. But the femme fatale, there's a great quote that's attributed to Margaret Atwood that says, the quote is, men are afraid that women will laugh at them, and women are afraid that men will kill them.
I saw that quote. I think you have that on your site, right? Is that on your blog?
No, actually, I don't. Oh. I don't. But that, maybe I do. I don't know. You find stuff of mine that's kind of interesting. But, you know, I think that's relevant in this case because sometimes the men that are reviewing or making the films really think of it as like being laughed at by one or being made a fool of by a woman is worse than violence.
Oh, that's horrible.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. So things change, but they're still interesting, right?
Right. I don't know. I hope they change. I hope everything's changed. Going on here, I really love the painting Blue Room as it shows 3 views of the female and a kind of a shadowy one-dimensional male. Now, is it a regular part of your process to dress the part and design the image before you begin painting, or was that something special you did for that one?
No, it's really normal. That's really normal. And that's something that a lot of illustrators do is that they dress up models and they take pictures. But I don't really have models, and so I will play all the parts.
That's fantastic.
And dress up in men's clothes, you know, and I've had enough experience drawing from the model live to be able to kind of translate myself into a male figure. You know, just broaden the shoulders and, you know, and just that. And then I'm able to kind of convert it into a male figure.
Oh, fantastic.
And yeah, it is fun. In fact, now what I really do is that I just turn on a video and I just kind of ham it up with the costumes and the lighting. And then I go and I capture film stills from the video afterwards.
Oh, okay. That's very nice. In your blog, you said that, quote, you consider the masters of film noir your teacher, my teachers, as well as my inspiration, unquote. Would you tell us about your favorite cinematographer, director, writer, or other influencer?
Some of my early influences, like even before I started doing this work, I loved Raging Bull. Okay. Which is a wonderful black and white film, you know, from, you know, and I was just like, wow, you know, I think it's really the thing I love black and white movies was Raging Bull, you know, which was done in what, 1980 or something?
80, that's yes.
Scorsese,
yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's very depressing, though.
Yeah. I love Out of the Past, and that was done by Nicholas Masurica. That's the cinematographer. But Out of the Past is just what a gorgeous film, right?
That's my shirt here.
Yes,
because that's such a, like, when she walks into that bar and he's been sitting in there, it's just like, wow. You know? Yeah, right. And then that one, I watched the remake, Against All Odds with Jeff Bridges.
You know,
that's the remake of it. And I saw that a long time before I ever saw Out of the Past. And when I saw Out of the Past, I just was totally blown away by it.
Oh, really? Yeah. You know what's funny is I don't think I've ever seen Against All Odds. I should, though, because I really like Jeff Bridges a lot. And Rachel Ward I like. So anyway, I should stop. I've never seen it. But so Out of the Past, I love. Citizen Kane, Touch of Evil, The Killers. Mm-hmm. That's another really great. I mean, you just look at those shots and you're just like, right?
Yes.
And when I was in college, I got to see The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, which is from 1920. No, it's a German expressionist film. Have you ever seen that one?
I know the film, but I've never watched it. I've seen clips of it.
You should watch it. It's crazy. It's really cool because it's done completely on these hand-painted sets that are not believable, but they're so effective.
They work.
And it's really fun.
And what, besides Beckman, what about in the artist realm? Who are your artistic inspirations?
Well, there's a lot.
Oh,
but, you know, you sent me the Edward Hopper film, and you know, I think that the comparisons between me and Edward Hopper is just undeniable. So definitely Edward Hopper. And then, so there's Tamara de Lempicka. You know her?
No, I don't.
So Tamara de Lempicka is really, really great. So, I think that I'm really influenced by Picasso,
Good.
but not all of Picasso. One of the things about Picasso is that he had this amazingly wide range of artistic styles, and so oftentimes when people think of his work, they think about the Cubism, but he did a lot of etchings that were more like based in classical mythology, which are really amazing. And he uses the Minotaur over and over and over again. And so he's a really great influence on me. And then also Egon Schiele is a really great influence because he's a great drawer and a draftsman. And then your shirt reminds me of a guy who's a contemporary right now, and his name is Thomas de Anthony.
Okay.
And his work looks like your shirt, and it's really fantastic. Degas was a really great influence on me.
Okay, very classic.
And Gauguin, not so much Van Gogh. They're put together. Van Gogh and Gauguin are oftentimes compared because they're contemporaries and had certain similarities, but it's really Gauguin that is really my big influence.
Okay.
And yeah, I can come up with more.
Okay.
But I know I can't remember.
Oh, I'd like to read another quote from your blog. And it says, quote, "My art is charged with longing, drama, sexual tension, taboos, and covert couplings. Like a private eye snapping a picture through a window, we espy people in places that are not supposed to be or with someone they ought not to be with. You could say I live vicariously through my own art," unquote. Would you care to expound on that topic? Because that's fascinating to me.
Well, yeah. I think it's true with a lot of things where, for a lot of people, let's just say, for example, it's cathartic. It's cathartic. That's part of what, art does for people, art of all forms, is that, so maybe somebody likes to watch more war films, right? But they don't want to go into combat, right? Or maybe they like punk rock, but they, like live a middle-class life, or, that kind of thing. And I just think that part of my attraction to film noir is the kind of over-the-top drama that can happen in them, and the ways in which people if they're not clever, they think they're clever. And they're trying to manipulate things to their advantage. And so part of what's really fun about watching it is like, are they going to succeed or not in their plot?
Right.
But in my real life, it's like, I do not do that at all. I'm like, I've done a really good job of like, I think that when I was younger, like everybody, when they're younger, they kind of go through their drama.
Yeah.
But I've done a good job of kind of making my life like very sort of simple and straightforward. And I hang out with people who are very trustworthy and well-meaning. And so I tend to live a life of great positivity, but I have this kind of macabre insensibility.
Right.
And, and I'm sure that's something that a lot of people get out of film noir, right?
Right. I didn't mean to imply that you were on the most wanted list or anything out there. I was talking to, metaphorically anyway. But yeah. So it does feed something. And, I like it because there's always somebody smarter, more or slipperier than yourself when you think you're at the top and you can beat everybody. There's very few that can really do that.
Yeah, well, and also to what end? Usually when you're doing things that are manipulative and not straightforward, you think that you're winning something, but oftentimes in the end, because what we really want, of course, is to be, safe and to be loved and, to be, recognized and appreciated. And you're not going to get that if you're lying and cheating to people, but, oftentimes it feels like you're going to win. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Oh, I know exactly what you're saying. Yes, absolutely. Because I love film noir. I try to watch one a day if I can find them. So I do, but but my idea of a good time is going in the backyard and cutting the grass. That's great. This is the first time I've heard Shakespeare referenced with film noir. You wrote, "Why is Shakespeare still so popular after all this time? Is it because his stories and characters are timeless?" Could you expand on that a little bit? I mean, do you see is Shylock a character out of Shakespeare that might turn up in film noir or something like that?
Well, I think the noiriest of of Shakespeare is Macbeth.
Okay.
That's about as noir as it gets. You know, the plot and the fact that it all comes collapsing down around them. And are you? I mean, I'm making this. There's been some really good movie adaptations of Macbeth too, but so they kill basically they're usurpers. They're usurpers, and they had like a plot and I just think it's great. That's very noir.
Yeah.
And the fact that it doesn't work, like they achieve some of their goals, but then they collapse, and go into madness and all this stuff, right?
It's very film noir, femme fatale, because they blame it all on the woman for pushing him into killing the king.
That's true.
Yeah.
But what I'm referring to directly when I'm talking about that part really has to do with the fact that the characters and the stories are so good with Shakespeare and so solid. And nowadays, people do adaptations. They put them in modern dress, or they, and that happens a lot. They put them in different situations, like maybe interwar Europe or something like that. But the story is so solid and the characters are so good, it translates. It doesn't come across as being dated or awkward. Yeah. And so that's sort of what I mean. And I'm not really talking about an individual film because, of course, with film noir, the quality of the films, they vary widely.
Sure.
I mean, there are some real stars out there, but the stock characters and the sort of general plot mechanisms are so solid that you can translate them into all kinds of exterior. You can change the genders of the people, you can change the time and things like that, and it can still like have a noir sensibility. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I'm wondering if anybody's adapted. I just watched the Michael Fassbender Macbeth the other night from 2015, and it's amazing. But I wonder if anybody's actually taken that and put it into a film noir and just run it as a film noir. Yeah,
I wonder too.
So,
did you ever see a movie called Brick?
Rick, I don't think so.
Okay, Brick, I saw it a long time ago, but it's a really good movie because what it is that it's a film noir that is set in a high school.
Okay.
And it's very funny because it's played completely straight. Like they talk noir talk, and it's a noir like plot line, and there's like Mr. Big, who just graduated last year, still living at his mom's house. I mean, it's very funny, but it is done really, really well, and I would recommend it. Brick is a good one.
Okay. I'll have to look that one up. That sounds interesting. Obviously, you watch film noir. I asked Alan K. Rohde this, and he wouldn't tell me what his favorite movie was, but do you have a favorite film noir, femme fatale, or a homme fatale? And for reference, mine is Born to Kill.
I love that question. Yeah, you tell me. Yeah, yours is.
Born to Kill, 1947, with Claire Trevor and Lawrence Tierney. They're so bad. They're both so bad.
Yeah, you got like the homme fatale and the femme fatale like wrapped up in the same movie.
Yeah,
and the fact that they're kind of going at each other and they're conspiring together at the same time. They're like animals, you know, in a cage.
They really are tough. Yeah. Well, so do you have any favorite that you would like to throw out?
Yeah. What my favorite movie probably of all time actually is Vertigo.
Very
good. Some people say Vertigo is not really a film noir, which is, fine. Eddie Muller says it's a film noir, so I'm willing to take his word for it. But at least it's noir adjacent. Like it's very noir-esque. But that is my favorite movie.
Yeah, that's a good movie.
Yeah. There's something about the longing and the kind of unrequited. I mean, because it's not unrequited. It's unrequited love, but really what it is an unrequited dream. Both of them have a dream of what they think love is, and they almost touch it, but they can't. And then there's a crime element, and it's really great. But that's probably my favorite film. But my favorite homme fatale is without a question Joseph Cotten in Shadow of a Doubt.
Shadow of a Doubt. Okay.
Have you ever seen that one?
I've watched part of it, but I haven't actually finished it. But it just came back up again because I was looking at some October stuff and the Dr. X, the Return of Dr. X, and his character was based on one of the serial killers that was running around at the time. Am I thinking of the right movie? Josie, I believe so.
Maybe. So yeah. Dr. X, isn't that an earlier film?
Yeah, that was much earlier. And then Humphrey Bogart was in The Return of Dr. X. And they mentioned it. I was reading in IMDb, and they said that I believe Joseph Cotten in Shadow of a Doubt was based on one of the killers.
Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah. I didn't know that. Yeah. Yeah, but in this movie, and it's funny because I saw this movie a long time ago before I really knew about, before I'd ever seen a lot of old movies. And so I always thought of Joseph Cotten as like this really like sexy leading man who was like so bad and lured women into terrible situations. And then I see him for Simpson, and I realized that that was an unusual role for him. He was a versatile actor, but oftentimes he played like the kind of like nice guy. Yeah. Right. Right. He was. He was a pretty regular, like in Citizen Kane you mentioned earlier, and The Third Man. Right. I believe he was. Third Man. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Just a decent guy. Just a very decent person. Right. In this movie, he's bad in the best way. He's great. And then my favorite femme fatale is probably Gloria Graham in Human Desire.
She's so good. She was so good. And just such. Yeah. I watched that the one where she died. I forgot what it's called. Film Stars Don't Die in Liverpool.
No, I have not seen that.
Oh, watch it, but it's sad. I mean, the actress does such a good job. Annette Bening. She does such a great job in that film, and it's just gut-wrenching. But good, yeah.
Yeah, I should watch that. That's a good one. But I think that part of the reason why I like her role as the femme fatale in Human Desire is because she's both a perpetrator and a victim at the same time. And I really identified with her in a way, like when her husband is like leaning on her to go talk to this guy to get his job back. And she says, I'd rather not. Right. And at that moment, when she says, I'd rather not, that something happened in her past, with this guy where she'd been victimized or something like that. But her husband just pushing her. And then she does it. Yeah. And then she turns around and then she uses her same feminine wiles to try and get Glenn Ford's character to kill her husband, and so she's a victim and she's a perpetrator at the same time.
That's a real.
And I think that's what's really fascinating about the character there. Yeah.
Oh, awesome. You mentioned on your site that you'd become interested in art related to archaeology, and talked about the book and the movie of The Dig 2021. Can you comment on that for us and where you're going in that direction?
Do you want me to talk about the film or the book or the art? Which one?
Where you're going with your art, if it would be best, what interests you about archaeology and why are you drawn to that? And, the secret that us professional archaeologists know that some days it's just ditch digging, moving wheelbarrows full of dirt up hills and stuff like that. They don't paint that though.
I can only imagine, man. I just look at people on my archaeology shows or whatever, and I just imagine what their backs and their shoulders feel like. Mm-hmm. I'm just like, oh my God. Well, I think it's so fascinating that you're an archaeologist, and a film noir buff at the same time. Just like I threw that out there on my blog post a year ago or something like that, and then you found it and you were like, it's amazing. But so basically, I have to say honestly, I've never been on a dig ever. Right. And so my fascination has, because of over the years, I've just gotten more and more and more I consume like books, magazines, and shows about archaeology, and I just keep finding it fascinating. And so I started to think, well, now, this is something that I should be, trying to expect, because it's sustained. It hasn't been like, oh yeah, I was into that for a little while and now I've moved on to something else. Like this has been going on for over a decade where I've gotten more and more and more interested in it. And so I don't really know because it's right at the very beginning. I'm looking over here because I'm looking at this little pile of materials that I've just started to play with.
Okay.
And so I think that there's something about having something emerge out of the dirt that is so fascinating to me. And then there's something about just history and the quest to be able to learn something about ourselves by things that you can't know, because history is cool when you read,
right,
about what people have written. But there's something so wonderful about it's almost like communicating with a ghost in a way. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
Because it's not written, you have to find out. And so I'm trying to figure out how am I going to. And so I'm sort of thinking about layers of things, of like semi-transparent layers where you can see different things through the layers on a flat. So it'll be flat, but sort of like different layers. That's what I'm thinking about. I'm still experimenting.
That's very interesting. I sent you the two pictures, but there's another one where it's got archaeologists at the top of the ground, and below the ground and around them are, colonial soldiers, and there's an Indian woman in basically under the ground offering a pot up to the archaeologist. And
wow.
Yeah, I'll try to find that one and send it out too. But it's kind of
the same artist.
It is the same artist. He had a contract, and they used him almost exclusively. But yeah, and so sometimes people see it and they understand, oh, this is all the stuff that's in there, and they're like, other people see it and go, why is that woman handing that pot up? But she's obviously. But yeah, I'll find a picture of that and send it to you, because it's kind of showing the multi-layers.
I'm curious, why did you decide to become an archaeologist?
My mother drugged me to mound sites and places like that all my life, and just was fascinated by the culture. And then I started as a business major and was taking an anthropology elective, and I was making C's in business and A's in anthropology, and I took it as a sign, and ended up working. I went on a volunteer dig for like a week, and that's it. Took off, and the 37 years worth of it.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Yeah, there's some digs around here that I know that if I wanted to focus on it, I can become a volunteer and get trained and things like that. And it's something I'm considering. But right now, I'm just trying to scrape together enough hours to be an artist. And
understood. Absolutely understood. What you said earlier, we were excavating in St. Augustine at the fort there, the Spanish fort in St. Augustine, Florida. And we got down to a coquina floor, which is a kind of stone that grows around there. And we were cleaning it. And the guy who was with me goes, we're the first people to touch this in 300 years. And I was like, that's pretty good. Pretty good.
Yeah. 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 That's just fascinating. I think that, there's something about learning about us as people by what we've learned and by what we leave in the ground. And I'm fascinated by that. I'm just fascinated by the whole process. The deterioration, not just, like this thing was built, but also how it deteriorates when it's in the ground, or you have a structure and and then archaeologists are able to figure out, like, was it burned? Did it collapse? Was it, recycled? Was it dismantled and used? Was the stones used in a different structure? And where is that structure? And so it's almost like a mystery novel.
It is kind of a detective thing. Did I tell you that I am writing my first archaeological mystery?
I was about to ask you about that.
Yeah.
How's that going?
It went down to the editor last week, and then they lost power down in South Florida, so I don't know when I'm going to get it back from her. But hopefully, 6 months to a year, it'll be ready.
And I get the archaeology magazine from the American Institute of Archaeology, and I'm sure you've seen that in the back. Oftentimes, I do see people with little advertisements for their novels, archaeology mystery novels. I mean, that's a thing.
Oh, I didn't know that. Well, I'll keep that in mind.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you seen those? Have you seen them? The little ads?
I have not seen the ads. I've seen the magazines, but I didn't notice the ads, and I'll have to look that up. That's great.
Yeah, it's a thing.
All right. Well, my last question, and I got this from Rachel Maddow, but what did I forget to ask you?
She's great. She's a great interviewer, isn't she? And what did I forget?
Okay. So was there anything else that I forgot to ask you, though, that you wanted to throw in besides that?
I think your questions have been great.
I appreciate it. Okay. Would you please tell the audience where they can find your artwork and any social media channels you want them to follow you on or anything?
Yes, that'd be great. So my website is very simple. It's lesliepetersonsapp.com. And so that's easy. And on that site, you will find little icons where you can link up to my social media sites. And they are different names, but they always have Leslie Patterson Sapp. So with Instagram, it's Leslie_Peterson_Sapp. On Facebook, it's Leslie Patterson Sapp Fine Art. And I'm on Twitter at Peterson Sapp.
Okay. Fantastic. Well, look, I really appreciate you coming. That was a lot of good information. I think everybody's going to get a lot out of this, and I'm excited to see where you go from here. I really appreciate you coming.
Thank you so much for asking me, and I've had a great time.
Oh, thank you. All right.
All right. Thanks so much. I really appreciate you asking me. It's so exciting.
All right. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.